And we are back. Yeah, so this week we've also seen that very interesting conversation, I would say, that the president had with the Mount Kenya region, because he spoke on the Kikuyu vernacular radio stations in the country. And I think we can listen to something that he said about the dynasty, because that's what people are talking about.
Muthirane yakuga ati tondu baba ari munene ani ndi munene ndiwe gutokerwo tukire dynasty ri eto thia ati tondu thogu ari ndagitari we tuike ndagitari waikirwo we ndwagirwo ni kuona arwaru tondu thogu ni amaroraga niguo.
All right, Francis, I think you did all that translation, but he is making an important, if I would say an interesting point, that hey, if my father was a doctor, does it mean I can't be a doctor and treat people meaningfully? And you'll explain to us how important that would be in that local context. But just quite interesting that the president, choosing at this critical moment in the country's political journey, to have this conversation in mother tongue, one day speaking to on many different radio stations, speaking to many people.
Absolutely. And what basically I understood the president to be doing in that Monday morning interview was basically to try and start the process of putting out the fires that have been lit in his backyard. You know, pure and simple. There's something that happens when you address people in their language, in their mother tongue. You're basically trying to appeal to their hearts and minds, speaking to them directly, speaking to their hearts directly. As to whether they agree with you or they don't agree with you is a different matter altogether. But I think this was the beginning of a process where we'll most likely may see the president doing a little bit of this. Maybe some impromptu visits, you know, in some parts of the Mount Kenya region, you know, ostensibly to inspect development projects. You'll see probably he will be visiting some churches, and while at it say, mimi hata sikuja kupiga siasa, nilikuja tu kanisa, and maybe address people in the Mount Kenya language, so to say. But more fundamentally, probably you will most likely see another meeting, maybe in Sagana or in Kirigiti, in Kiambu, or wherever. A scenario where he probably will call leaders from the Mount Kenya region to come and try and respond directly to some of the questions they have been raising. But it's a fact that there has been some disquiet in the Mount Kenya region, and people are obviously asking, where is the president? We voted for him. He needed to respond to a few questions. And there's some personal issues that people have had with the government. And probably that also explains why there seems to be some resistance for BBI and other things related to 2022 as spearheaded by the president. You remember there's some business issues that came up. You know, there are some people whose businesses went down, and they blame the government directly. You'll even hear some comparisons of when President Kibaki was in power vis-a-vis when President Uhuru Kenyatta is in power. You'll hear some comparisons about how business was being done and so on and so forth. So there's some people who have personal grievances as a result of their businesses that went down, or as a result of maybe the coffee, tea, milk farming that has had a problem. And so when you try and tell them something about BBI, they're telling you, first give us answers about this. And you'll see now attempts by the president and the government to directly respond to these questions. Lastly, you've seen some CSS now on tours in the Mount Kenya region. And not just any CSS, specific CSS who are going to deal with specific issues that are coming from the region. I see it as part of this process of the president trying to go back to the Mount Kenya region to pacify the region, to explain to the region what has happened and why it has happened, and maybe answer questions that are fundamental and direct from the region that elected him almost to a man in 2013 and 17.
Linus, let me come to you. I mean, interesting that the president took on this issue of dynasties, because it's a big issue, and it is a key plank of what the William Ruto axis of what is left of Jubilee is running with. Obviously now there are people who associate them with another party, but it's interesting that this is what the Ruto side has been running with as a key plank of their platform, and the president in a very direct way now dealing with it, that, you know, this dynasty thing is being said there, but what is the issue? What is the problem? If my father was a president, if my father was a doctor, can't I be a doctor?
It's very interesting. What is done is to sustain the defense that he started in Mululu, where for the first time he went head-on with his deputy president. I always wonder what would have happened if the DP had attended the meeting, because the environment was such that we have to face the issues of the moment, and one of them is this dynasties versus hustlers narrative. He has explained it twice now that this is dangerous. It divides the people. It can lead into other problems. But for him to choose to address the Kikuyu tribe in the language is also a sign, a second time, or is it third time this time, that he is taking a lot of pressure politically in his backyard, and he needs to address it. Let's remember the first time was in Kasarani during the Akorino conference, where the deputy president was seated there and the president went on to address the gathering in Kikuyu. Then there was the Sagana meeting, which Francis attended.
Absolutely.
And it was addressed in Kikuyu. And then now, the interviews that...
Actually, there's one more. Do you remember in Gatanga, the president went to open some dispensary?
Yes.
And he also said some few things. Actually, a replica of what he said at the Akorino function, he directly spoke about the MPs. Actually, calling MPs now allied to the deputy president's side as traitors, you know, telling people that they are misleading the region, and that he decided to speak in mother tongue also explains a few things.
Yes.
I saw a lot of backlash, people asking whether it was the right thing to do, whether he should have spoken in Kikuyu or not.
And that question is still pertinent. It's still very pertinent whether the president is too easy on the trigger with vernacular. Because if you look at his predecessors, and Mwai Kibaki faced the same kind of pressure, because Central Kenya is a very demanding region politically, very, very demanding, and especially when the president comes from that region. These questions of development will always come up, but you have to respond every time in Kikuyu, because in essence, what are you telling the rest of the nation? Some of your critics will go to the constitution and say, look, you are supposed to be the symbol of national unity, and you are speaking, addressing one nation. What is this in BBI that is good for one region but not the rest of the regions? Why can't you explain the same to a Turkana, that what is in BBI will be as good for the Kikuyu as it will be with the Turkana community? But I'm trying to understand the situation the president finds himself in. Politically, he is in a situation where, and you asked about the disconnect, Francis. Here is the disconnect in my view. We changed the constitution in 2010. And by that, we now have an executive that is supposed not to be political. So when you talk of CSs, they would go to the region, but they don't have the political clout of elected members of parliament. Mwai Kibaki, Daniel Arap Moi, and the president's late father, Jomo Kenyatta, all had regional appointment who had their own personal clout. Clout is not the escort car that the CSs go with. It is the clout you enjoy on the ground. You can actually go to the ground and persuade people and tell them this is what the president wants. He lacks that in Central Kenya. That's why you look at the past few years, actually since the handshake, the elected leaders from Central Kenya have been running rings around the president. They would actually hold him hostage. They would make all those demands and make some, honestly, allegations that are not exactly accurate about underdevelopment of Central Kenya. and it sells. And that is because there is the absence, there is the disconnect of political linkmen. Here is one other thing that must be pointed out. The president's own way of doing things. It is a gap, it creates a gap. Since Sagana, have we ever seen him interacting really with the elected leadership of Central Kenya? He doesn't. They say he's not reachable. He's done his politics in a way that is different from how the DP does it, for example. This is a contact sport. These guys need to know overnight, are you still with them? That's how politics works. Yep. We have fed it that way since independence. So he's tried to do it differently, being inaccessible politically, and the gap grows. And this is how his opponents are fitting in narratives. Right. Oh, Central Kenya is underdeveloped. Oh, the president is inaccessible. Oh, the DP is more accessible yes. and all that. Yeah. So it's also down to the personal style of the president. Right. One last point I'll make, Joe, and that's on the issue of BBI. And I think we'll run the bites on his persuasion of BBI. Why is there a gap in Central Kenya? Because of the same reasons. There is a gap in the communication. Who is the bearer of the message? Irungu Kangata, in his letter, spoke of the provincial administration. Yep. Yeah, the administration, the government, and said, let them step back.
And allow the politicians to carry the show.
Yes. You see, provincial, and I'm using it deliberately because that's how it's been shaped historically. The administration historically is only supposed to come as a quiet backup to a political process, not the face of it. You can't have county commissioners being the face of, or the chiefs collecting the signatures.
Yeah. We're selling the agenda.
There's something in the instinct of a mwananchi, especially a mwananchi that is judging you in the second term, to be very, very harsh with what they come up with and say, you're being funny, you're being repressive. Why are you not talking to me politically? You're talking to me administratively.
Yes. But Yvonne, isn't there that dilemma that someone like the president must be dealing with? On the one hand, there is what Linus was talking about, of this whole idea of symbol of national unity, but on the other hand, the very real cold hard fact of politics, that politics is local, that at the end of the day you need to mobilize your base, as it were, and build it from there. That actually, even when you look at people who become presidents, they kind of built it from home and then picked things here and there and made up the total.
Yeah, absolutely. And so two things, qua ground vitu ni different, and both from the local and also in the national. One of the things when I saw, that joint interview, was one of the things I asked myself, has the president actually done an in-person tour in central Kenya? And correct me if I'm wrong, he seems to speak to them on radio, and this is not the first time. Remember in 2017, we were just saying that before the break. Yeah, he again did another, joint radio station. But even this, for me, seems to be something that he didn't carry them along from the beginning. We've said time and again that did he explain to those in his backyard from the beginning the premise of, one, the handshake, and BBI. It's sort of doing it here in Nairobi, even in times when you see him addressing the issues to do with the handshake and the BBI. You see him at Bomas, you see him at these institutions, rather than seeing him on the ground with the people. Beyond even rallying his base, have we seen the president actually going out to Turkana and to Mombasa and to, and interacting with the people? We only seem to see him at the State House in Mombasa, at Bomas of Kenya, speaking on radio. And whilst radio is a very powerful tool, particularly vernacular, there's a sense in which unaongea na sisi kutoka huko Nairobi, as opposed to coming down here and speaking as a people. And his tone, in this interview was, a man was on his defense. His back was against the ropes. He is defending, his narrative, and he's responding to the narrative that has already been set by the deputy president, to the point that, he can't even name them. when he said they are useless, who is they? Like, name them. You are the president. And he says, that they are the ones who are telling you about the cost of BBI, but aren't they the ones who are, stealing all of this money?
Actually,
who is they? Yeah, maybe we can listen to that.
The 2 billion.
Right.
tiga guka hakuhingica iria maiyaga o muthenya ni ikirite bilioni icio igiri andu aya ni buri tondu rina ndikuhetiga gweka ati kukuga uguo tondu urenda gutwira ati ni kuhuthika bilioni igiri ni kuhuthika ndiwe bilioni imwe ni kuhuthika ki neguo we iria ciaku urahuthira ri o mwaka ni cigana.
So they mislead the people, they steal from the public, they are useless. For a man who's in his second term, and which we know is traditionally sort of a lame duck, this was what it seemed like. Tackle it head on, say these are the people, name them, and make an effort to then deal with it. It seemed like a very helpless thing for the head of state, the commander-in-chief, the man who has all the instruments of power, to seem so helpless that they are stealing 2 billion shillings every day. And so these are some of the things that even when he does go to the people, he does seem like a bit of a lame duck when he makes statements like these, when he makes addresses.
And there's something worse than that.
Yeah.
And that is when he keeps talking of they.
Yeah.
He has brought himself down to the level of they, whoever they is. So it is a competition of two sides. And like you're saying, he's helpless about it.
And when you look at, you're talking about helplessness. When
you needed to get protection from...
Yes, I needed to protect me. Yeah,
but isn't it interesting, Jamila, as you come in, that even in that statement, the concern there didn't seem to be... the loss of the 2 billion. It was more like,
he was blaming someone else for it.
They are speaking about it, about what we want to spend.
Just a justification.
But anyway, you were to
yes, because that whole interview was about an hour long, Kashuri?
About an hour and 7 minutes.
Exactly. And what he spoke about, majority of during that time, was BBI and the politics of the dynasty versus hustler and all that. He didn't speak about issues to do with the economy. Kashuri, remember you spoke about how people are angry with how things are. Their businesses are not doing as well as they were. Maybe they start comparing it to during Kibaki's time. COVID-19 pandemic has made things worse in terms of now businesses being shut down, people losing their jobs, and those I think are the things which are more important to the people. In people even in central Kenya and across the country, he didn't address those issues. For him, this was purely a political interview. He spoke about BBI and he spoke about how it will benefit the people of that area, and goes on to say how the BBI, those who are opposing it, are looking at here and now. They're not looking at the benefits of BBI for this area in the coming 100 years or so, and that's what I'm thinking about. And you could clearly see his anger was directed at the deputy president, who he did not name throughout that 1 hour and 7 minutes. Hakumsema. But then now he starts talking about development projects, because you talk about how people are saying hakuji hapa, lakini they see the deputy president a lot more than they do him, and that is the narrative on the ground by those who support the president, saying munamwona hapa akikuja kuzindua miradi ya maendeleo. And for the president, that was I think one issue that really upset him, saying but miradi ya maendeleo ni ya serikali gani? Si ni serikali yangu. It's not like there are two governments, one ya Uhuru Kenyatta and one for the deputy president William Ruto. And I think also for him, when he was speaking and the anger, and we tried, thank you for the translation by the way, Gashuri, for him, he's seen that the deputy president is actually
it is actually authentic.
that the deputy president is actually making inroads into central Kenya without his help. Hamshiki mkono kumsaidia tuingie. No, he's doing it on his own. Ni kama mtu amekuja ameingia back door, ameenda, unamsikia kwa sitting room anauliza chai. And you're wondering how did he get in here? So I think for the president is, one, he's trying maybe to take him back kwa mlango, main door, gonga, omba ruhusa kwanza, can I come in? And two, I don't think he wants to be the first leader from central Kenya who has no say in the leadership of that region, because it would be shameful if him as the president of the country has no say in who is the leader in terms of now going forward for the community.
And succession. I just have one line for the president and all of the BBI proponents.
We need to take a break, but make it quick.
Angalia, kukoje.
Just read the room. With the comments. You keep bashing your head in with it.
Which room? There are 47 rooms. Is it 43?
Well, all of them. Read them all.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back, and we'll talk a little bit about that acting business at City Hall.